Hello and welcome back. Thank you for joining us on our third day and the first day for our LIP get-together. As Canada works to welcome many refugees from different parts of the world, it is essential that equity be a priority in how different groups are viewed, treated, and integrated into Canadian society. I'm Abiha Syed, Community Engagement Coordinator from Immigration Partnership Waterloo region. Welcome to this plenary, Leveraging LIPs and RIFs, influence to promote a more equitable welcome to refugees from different regions of the world. We have very special 4 guests here to discuss this important topic and share their lived experiences. Rashed Araf is the chair of Hamilton Immigration Partnership Council. Rashed is an experienced leader, social worker, and longtime social justice advocate. We have Mohammad Araf here, Program Officer, Hamilton Immigration Partnership Council. Araf leads the evaluation data analysis project and has worked as a community-based researcher in diverse community groups. Apollinaire Yalange, project manager, and has coordinated several social economic integration programs for newcomers since 2010. And then we have Bella Nicheke, Community and Stakeholder Relatives Manager, Refugee 613. Bella has more than 16 years experience in nonprofit organization working nationally and internationally. I would like to invite Mohammad Araf to speak first.
Okay, thank you so much, Abiha, and thank you everyone for being here today. I know that most of you may be very tired at the end of the third day, and thanks for sticking around for this plenary. My name is Araf, and I come from Hamilton, which is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie Neutral Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas, which is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. I also acknowledge that we are sitting here in Ottawa, which is built on the unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. As an immigrant in this country myself, I'll keep reflecting on what this means for me and my community. In this presentation, I will be providing an overview of our local immigration partnership and some immigration trends in our city, and then hand it over to Rashed Afif, who is my co-presenter and the chair of our local immigration partnership council, to dive deeper into the lessons that we have learned from our response to the 2 crises that we will be talking about today. So, the Hamilton Immigration Partnership Council, or HIPSI as we call it, was founded in 2009. We are one of the earliest immigration partnerships in Canada. We are operating out of the municipal government and embedded in the Economic Development Division. We have over 30 members who represent various sectors, including settlement providers, school boards, our local university and college, the Chamber of Commerce, nonprofit organizations, as well as community leaders who have lived experience of immigration. This may be true for most of the local immigration partnerships here. Our table is quite diverse. Over half of our council members have lived experience of immigration, including our current chair and vice chair. The strategic priorities for us in the next few years are economic stability, social inclusion, and community engagement for newcomers. But we also recognize that our work is evolving, and one of the foundational principles in our work is addressing the basic needs of newcomers and refugees. And this has been an important focus of our work, especially in the past year and a half with the arrival of Afghans and Ukrainians. So to contextualize today's presentation, we thought that we should provide a quick overview of the immigration trends in Hamilton. And for those of you who don't know, Hamilton is a mid-sized city in southern Ontario. We are situated between Toronto and Niagara Falls, and we have our population is 570,000 people. As this chart shows, immigration has been on the rise in Hamilton over the past several years, except for the pandemic year and the Syrian refugee wave. We see immigration consistently increase from 2015 to 2021. Which was a record-breaking year in terms of immigration admissions, both for Hamilton and in Canada nationally. The immigrants make up 26% of our population as of the last census in 2021. We are a community that welcomes many refugees every year. And in fact, Hamilton receives or has double the share of refugees than Ontario's average. And this was true in this graph is from 2016, but this still holds true in 2021. In fact, 35% of recent immigrants in Hamilton are refugees. One reason behind this higher share of refugees in Hamilton is because we are a RAP community. So in this presentation, we would like to focus on the two refugee influxes in Canada, one from Ukraine and the other one from Afghanistan. These are two very distinct refugee flows with vastly different responses and measures from the government of Canada, as we have all heard throughout this conference. And I won't bore you with the details of what these programs are, as you all are very familiar. But just to mention that in Hamilton, although we don't know the exact number of Ukrainians who are currently living in Hamilton, but we estimate that about 2,000 of them have arrived since March, and that is through stats from school registrations, the settlement service use, and anecdotally what we hear from the Ukrainian Canadian Congress Hamilton chapter. The Afghan arrivals come to Canada mainly as government-assisted refugees and privately sponsored refugees, so far, we know that nationally about 24,000 Afghan refugees out of the 40,000 committed by the government of Canada have arrived in Canada. 600 of them have arrived in Hamilton. We are among the top 8 communities in terms of the Afghan arrivals. And many Afghans who have arrived in our community have secured permanent housing and employment as well with the help of the RAP agency. And just to also add that obviously Hamilton, as is the case in other communities, continues to receive refugees from other parts of the world. And in fact, in 2021 and 2022, the number of government-assisted refugees who have arrived in Hamilton is much higher than 2020, which was a pandemic year, and the years before that. And we know that from January to date, about 450 non-Afghan government-assisted refugees have arrived in Hamilton. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rashed to talk about the LIPs response to the two crises. Thank you.
Thank you, Araf. My name is Rashed Afif. I am the chair of Hamilton LIP. I also sit at Brantford LIP, and I'm the senior director an agency called Wesley, and which is the RAP agency in Hamilton and Brantford. So we would like to share two examples of how LIP proactively responded to the crisis and what was the result of those proactive responses. So as all of you know, in March 2022, unfortunately, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine started, and there was an announcement of arrival of Ukrainians to our cities. And as soon as it was in the news, we decided to invite the stakeholder, settlement sector, health sector, the Ethno-Cultural Association, which is the UCC, and I'm sure a lot of your organizations are working with our lovely colleague at UCC, and the mayor's office to start the conversation, which was so interesting because it did started the conversation on, oh, actually I have to go. Yes, thank you, Araf. I'm a bit lazy. So, which led to Mayor's advisory committee on the Ukrainian humanitarian response. So it's so interesting to see that with the work of Sarah and Araf and her team in Hamilton, the city of Hamilton activated the emergency response system, which was first activated during COVID, when COVID started, and the second time in that 2 years, we were able to encourage the city to activate, which led to a lot of other partners from the health sector, from the school board, from settlement and other sectors. They all came together and started talking how we should be a good host for our new Canadian. And we also started creating working groups on each topic, which were regularly meeting, and I think we tried to create a welcoming community for the Ukrainians in Hamilton. And that's a picture that Araf, you could see Araf, that was a welcoming center. We brought all the service providers, including Service Canada, Service Ontario, to be at one place so that Ukrainian and their family can come and register to the services that are available for them, right in one location. So, next slide, please. Similar to this, proactive approach to the issues, the crisis that happens, Hamilton LIP also did similar, and as soon as in last August 2021, when Afghanistan and Kabul collapsed, we started the conversation on how we should make Hamilton a welcoming place for the new Canadians that are going to arrive from Afghanistan. So we brought all the agencies, including the RAB agency, which is I'm the senior director, and other settlement agencies, community health teams, City of Hamilton, and we start talking. The first goal was to share the information. I'm sure at the time you read a lot of news. There was some negative news. So we find out that the informations are not clear and transparent to the community. So we use that table as a way to share what's really happening and what they're eligible. And be honest and share what are the gaps and see how the community can fill the gaps. One of the gaps was the hotels in GTA. If you can recall, the first couple of cohorts of Afghan came, they were in GTA, and then they start connecting with people in GTA, and they stayed in GTA, which was a big challenge because we wanted them to be distant in the smaller communities. So as a result, we say, well, they don't know what and where Hamilton is and what we have to offer. So we created a video, Araf and his team created a video, YouTube clips, which also featured the mayor and all the leaders of Afghans in that community. And we provided in their own languages in Farsi, Dari, and Pashto. And the result is so good because you could see how many Afghans have been settled and housed in Hamilton. They are now a quite big community in Hamilton. And also it inspired some more collaboration. For example, between the community health clinic, it's called Refugee in Hamilton, and Wesley, which is my agency. We could talk and see how they could support Afghans for the health assessment. And I think yesterday there was some conversation about mental health with refugees, and that was also identified as a gap in our community. And collaboratively, Wesley and Refuge, with the help of HEPSI, we could secure some funding and hire some clinicians to support mental health in Afghani, in the Farsi and Pashto languages. So in summary, I believe HEPSI response to the Afghan and Ukrainian refugee crisis showed the important role of LIP play in welcoming and supporting refugees. And I should thank you, all of you who are here from LIP and RIF, that the support you're providing to our new Canadian. I myself am a refugee, so I know how much your work is valuable to the people who are coming to your communities. The second piece is HEPSI was proactive, and I have to emphasize on that, being proactive. And that's what I have seen with LIP in Hamilton. They were proactive and brought together the key stakeholders who would otherwise not meet to see how we could make it, how we could lessen the challenges of settlement journey for the new Canadian and leave with some good experience. And the HEPSI also facilitated some collaborations between the health, school, and settlement agencies. So the last slide, we have two questions for you, and I think at the end of this panel, you would talk among Syed yourself. I'm not going to read the questions for the sake of time, but as some final thoughts and as someone who's looking as a settlement agency or as someone who's looking toward the LIP, I think we have a long road to go. I think the settlement sector, resettlement, and LIP should be more involved in advocacy. I think it could be really good to bring some of the challenges up to the front and encourage more equitable, accessible to the services. For example, opening up settlement services, eligibility for refugee claimants, for convention refugees, for international students. If someone says we cannot, we did it for Ukrainian, we can. So LIP should not accept no, as the settlement agency should not. The other thing is, when I try to reflect on arrival of Ukrainian, I think we as a Canadian show to the government of Canada that we can host 100,000 Ukrainian from March until now. Like, this number is not a small number, 100,000. So if someone tells me 40,000 is a big number, I would laugh. I say no. Let the community decide. I think this Ukrainian arrival created a very interesting model to Canada, and I think we should push IRCC, stopped putting limit on the arrival of refugees. Let the community decide how many we can accept in our communities. When I read the Immigration Level Plan 2023 and 2025, it's so encouraging, and we keep bragging about that. But if you look deeper in that platform, every immigration category is increased, but refugees. That includes privately sponsored refugees that the government does not pay a penny for them. I believe when we are bringing 500,000 people a year, that must mean more refugees, not less. And that's on our shoulders to advocate. And lastly, please have people of experience in your LIP. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashed and Mohammad. Apollinaire, stage is all yours.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je commence par remercier Victoria et son équipe de m'avoir invité à faire une présentation aujourd'hui sur la part des francophones en matière de parrainage des réfugiés. Et je vais le faire à travers un projet dont j'assure la gestion, le renforcement des capacités francophones pour le parrainage privé des réfugiés, RCFPP. Ce projet est un projet novateur parce que c'est un projet qui se fait à l'échelle du Canada, hors Québec. Il y a le CESOC, Conseil économique social d'Ottawa-Carleton, il y a la cité collégiale, il y a également l'accueil francophone de la société manitobaine qui sont en partenariat pour mener ce projet. C'est un projet qui a démarré en janvier, il est pilote, projet qui a démarré en janvier 2022 et qui doit se terminer dans son format actuel en mars 2023. Il est financé par l'IRCC. Pourquoi ce projet? Quels sont ses objectifs et pour quels résultats? D'abord, il s'inscrit dans la volonté du gouvernement de diversifier les voies pour promouvoir l'immigration francophone. Il est également taillé sur la mesure du par et pour. C'est dans l'esprit du par et pour les francophones. On sait qu'au-delà d'une langue, il y a toute une culture et que cette culture est très importante quand on veut intégrer les gens. Et c'est cette volonté-là. Quels sont les objectifs? Ce projet qui n'a qu'une durée très limitée avait pour objectif de faire l'inventaire des ressources existantes pour les adapter en français afin d'aider les francophones à comprendre le processus. Et deuxièmement, il s'agissait d'organiser des événements et commencer la sensibilisation des communautés francophones parce qu'à date, il n'y avait pas de francophones qui faisaient le parrainage. Et quels étaient les résultats? Quels sont les résultats qui étaient assignés à ce projet? Il nous fallait tout simplement trouver 100 clients sensibilisés au bien fondé du parrainage privé et qui ont eu accès aux ressources disponibles, c'est-à-dire tout simplement les documents en français. Puis il fallait aussi trouver 30 clients qui sont bien informés du processus de parrainage privé aux réfugiés. Alors, quelle a été la méthode pour atteindre ces objectifs? C'était un pari et c'est pour ça que c'est un projet simplement pilote. Quelle a été notre stratégie pour atteindre ces résultats? D'abord, nous avons signé tout simplement une entente avec tout simplement un service existant anglophone qui a la capacité de formation en français. C'est le RCTP. Je pense qu'il doit y avoir des membres qui sont ici. Et dans cette entente, deuxièmement, il fallait donc procéder à la sensibilisation aux formations et pour atteindre les résultats escomptés. Maintenant, au niveau de l'entente. L'entente de collaboration donnait des missions, d'abord à notre programme. RCFPP, c'était aller chercher les francophones, ramasser les informations, les mettre en ligne, et puis donner le mandat à RCTP de faire la formation parce que nous n'avions pas de ressources, nous n'en avons pas, et ils les avaient. Donc c'est une coopération extrêmement intéressante parce que on a vu que les francophones peuvent travailler avec les organismes anglophones quand les ressources, pour partager les mêmes ressources. C'est ce qu'on a fait. Et les ressources qu'on a mis en ligne, on les a organisées à la manière francophone, mais nous n'avons créé aucun document. Ce sont des documents qui existent et qui étaient mis à notre disposition par RCTP. Alors, la sensibilisation et la formation a été faite, une campagne de sensibilisation le 12 mai, on a lancé une campagne. Et depuis jusqu'à date, 3 sessions de formation de 6 heures, qui totalisent 6 heures, 3 ateliers de formation en groupe sur les étapes de processus de parrainage et des séances personnalisées de coaching individuel pour que les gens qui s'engagent comprennent bien ce qu'il faut faire. Qu'est-ce qu'on a arrêté comme résultat? Vous allez voir, pour un projet qui devait atteindre 100 clients, nous avons d'abord eu 646 personnes inscrites pour pouvoir suivent la session. 478 se sont connectés au pic, au sommet de ces sessions Zoom. 271 personnes sont restées jusqu'à la fin. 123 ont voulu continuer pour poser des questions. Et 53 ont participé à des ateliers de processus de parrainage. Et 16 aujourd'hui sont engagés vers le processus de parrainage. Alors, pour ce projet qui était tout simplement un projet d'essai, on réalise d'abord qu'il y a une volonté réelle de parrainage sur les francophones. Et on voit aussi que le projet a atteint et a dépassé même les cibles qui étaient attendues avant. Oui. Ce sont alors d'autres éléments que le projet nous montre, c'est qu'il y a des moyens financiers qui sont très limités pour les francophones pour parrainer. La majorité des gens qui veulent parrainer, c'est des anciens des nouveaux immigrants. À peine ils ont un salaire, mais ils n'ont pas d'épargne. Ils ont souvent une maison, ils peuvent parrainer une personne, mais pas une famille où il faut mobiliser quand même un budget assez important. Alors, certains même ont des difficultés de réunir 5 personnes pour faire le groupe de 5. Voilà donc les leçons qu'on a tirées de ce projet. Alors, aujourd'hui, puisque le projet semble avoir atteint les objectifs, quelle est la suite? Où est-ce qu'on s'en va? Qu'est-ce qu'on va faire? Si arrivé au 31 mars, oui. Alors, on réalise que les communautés francophones attendent beaucoup plus qu'une simple sensibilisation. Ils veulent, et avant de savoir quelles sont ces attentes, voyons d'abord ce qui se passe dans notre pays lorsqu'il s'agit d'aller chercher des réfugiés pour les installer. Qu'est-ce qu'on fait ici? Où se trouve, par exemple, précisément, où est-ce que le Canada va chercher aujourd'hui les réfugiés pour leur établissement au Canada? On sait bien que, par exemple, en août 2002, le pays avait déjà accueilli 20 625 réfugiés afghans sur 40 000 annoncés. 70% ont été pris en charge par le gouvernement, 29% sont dans des programmes privés, sont parrainés par les privés, et que 1%, c'est les programmes mixtes des personnes sélectionnées par les visas. Si, je pense qu'on retourne en arrière. Il y a back, yeah. En août 2020, back. On se rappelle aussi qu'en 2015-16, le Canada a accueilli 29 000 Syriens, environ 25 000, et que 54% étaient pris en charge par le gouvernement. Puis que 38% étaient des personnes parrainées par le privé, et que 8% étaient des personnes désignées par le bureau des visas dans le fameux programme mixte. Alors, des questions qui se posent, qu'on peut poser, c'est est-ce qu'on peut envisager un quota pour les réfugiés francophones dans les programmes existants, comme on le fait? Ça, c'est une question qu'on peut se poser. Sinon, que peut-on mettre en place qui soit adapté aux francophones? Parce que si on regarde à ma connaissance, il n'y a pas encore de quota, il n'y a pas de cible annuelle pour les réfugiés francophones, au même titre que le quota qui a été décidé de 4,4%. Et on réalise que les contingents qui arrivent ici, 40 000 qu'on attend, puis 25 000 Syriens, sont des gens qui vont beaucoup plus dans les communautés anglophones. C'est plus facile. Alors, comment peut-on atteindre le quota de 4,4% qui n'a jamais été atteint? C'est parce qu'il y a des arrivées massives, une arrivée massive des réfugiés qui ne viennent pas grossir et qui n'aident pas beaucoup à réaliser le projet du gouvernement. C'est pour cela que vraiment il est grand temps aujourd'hui de penser comment recruter maintenant, comment aller chercher dans cet élan humanitaire, parce qu'on vraiment, on sait que le gouvernement le fait pour cet élan humanitaire, mais il ne faut pas oublier que cet élan humanitaire est accompagné par aussi par le fait qu'on amène des gens qui arrivent ici pour la vitalité économique et culturelle et démographique aussi des communautés. Et c'est très important d'y penser et d'y aller de cette manière. Alors, si on est d'accord avec ça, je pense que le gouvernement doit découvrir d'autres filons, où il faut aller chercher des niches et il faut aller chercher des immigrants en dehors. Je vais vous laisser sur cette carte du HCR, du Haut Commissariat des Réfugiés des Nations Unies, qui nous montre des chiffres. Si on veut vraiment aller chercher les francophones, il est grand temps d'explorer ces parties du monde où il y a des réfugiés. Ce sont des gens qui vivent des situations humanitaires terribles. Nous avons beaucoup de réfugiés francophones d'Afrique qui sont dans des pays anglophones, comme le Kenya, l'Ouganda, l'Afrique du Sud, qui vivent dans des situations horribles. Mais c'est vrai, les journalistes n'y vont pas et ça ne se parle pas. Mais il est grand temps que dans l'élan humanitaire, le gouvernement puisse aller explorer et amener ces gens. Vous allez voir le profil. Le profil de ces gens, c'est souvent majoritairement des jeunes familles et surtout des individus de 18 à 35 ans. C'est des gens qui protestent, qui ne sont plus d'accord avec les méthodes de travail. Et ce sont des jeunes, souvent humanitaires, et qui ont fait des études secondaires, universitaires et même post-universitaires. Souvent, ils ont déjà goûté à l'anglais, ils sont capables d'arriver ici, de s'intégrer rapidement. Donc, sur ce, je vous laisse vraiment sur quel est le quota, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour les francophones en matière de réfugiés. Merci.
Thank you, Apollinaire. Bella, please.
Merci, Abiha. Je suis la dernière personne à parler et je suis très impressionnée parce que aucun des intervenants avant moi n'a parlé du fait qu'il ou qu'elle était intimidé. Et je n'ai pas préparé de présentation PowerPoint, donc you will all be looking at me. Bon, merci de vos encouragements. My name is Belan Sheke, and I'm from Refugee 613, where I'm responsible of community and stakeholder relations for InfoHub project. If you wonder what is Refugee 613, we are a communication and mobilization hub that works to improve refugee welcome. We convene and support stakeholders working with refugees at the local level. And at the national level, we develop content, training, and strategic advice for the delivery of settlement information. And in Refugee 613, I am specifically attached to Newcomer InfoHub project. And then in InfoHub project, we create simple, plain language and culturally appropriate fact sheets, infographics, videos, and more to improve access to practical information about life in Canada. And then we translate them and we distribute them across digital networks, on digital networks popular with newcomers. And we advise government and service providers on communication strategies to reach newcomers, audiences, and test their content with target audiences. So I was asked to speak about the specific roles of RIFs and LIPs in creating equity in refugee resettlement. I am not an expert in your work, but what I do know is that you are in a good position to influence positive change and policies for decision making. When I was reflecting on the subject to prepare my remarks, I couldn't help but dwell on the inequity that many of us have observed in recent months since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. The inequity was not new, but the response to Ukraine made it bigger and more obvious. Many of us observed it because it was a fact, and there was no way to ignore it. And add to that my personal experience. I arrived in Canada as an asylum seeker. It was almost 5 years ago. It will be 5 years in January. I know what it's like to leave everything behind, to go into the unknown. I know the fear of being turned back. I know that feeling to be nothing, to lose a large part of yourself, this feeling that all you are does not ultimately weigh much on the land of asylum. So let's talk about this inequality, which I would also call inequity, both literally and figuratively. First, the ease offered to displaced persons from Ukraine to arrive in Canada. The reason why I don't call them refugees is because the path offered to them does not call them refugees, even though we know that what has happened to Ukraine as a result of the invasion of Russia has infatuated millions of refugees. And like so many refugees in the world, Ukrainians have been displaced by war, and in many cases, they have experienced severe trauma. And in that situation, it's priceless to know that you are welcome in a safer place. It's priceless to know that decisions are being made to welcome you. I cannot emphasize enough how big this is, how it eases the burden on the migrant. It's one less unknown. And this sense of welcome is a luxury that the asylum seeker doesn't have. For him, it's a question of playing everything for everything. It's double or nothing. For the asylum seeker, the first challenge is to be able to have the door opened, to be accepted to physically enter Canadian soil. After that begins another journey, that of being recognized as indeed a refugee. It can take 3 months to 2 years, and in some cases you need to be able to afford a lawyer to complete the process. This is for asylum seekers, and for government-assisted refugees and private-sponsored refugees, the process is costly in terms of money and time. So the responses to the war in Ukraine around the world evokes white privilege. In the media, the discourse was explicit. I will remember, I hope you all remember, that vous vous souvenez tous du discours qui était dans les médias. Je vais vous laisser le temps de mettre les écouteurs. Donc, les médias avaient un discours qui faisait comprendre qu'ils étaient partisans, que c'était ce qui arrivait à l'Ukraine était en train de produire des réfugiés qui ne sont pas comme les autres, des réfugiés qu'on n'a pas l'habitude de voir, des réfugiés aux yeux bleus qui conduisent des voitures spéciales. Donc, c'était un peu ça le discours. Et c'est ça qui a soulevé le sentiment de ce privilège blanc, qu'il y a des réfugiés qui sont plus privilégiés que d'autres. Et qui dit privilège blanc parle aussi de racisme, parce que ce sont les deux revers d'une même médaille. It's the two sides of the same coin. Parce qu'aucun autre groupe de réfugiés ne s'est vu ouvrir des portes aussi vite et aussi facilement. Je vais continuer en anglais. Je ne sais plus quelle langue je parle en fait. Canada is a land of asylum, and it's among the most welcoming countries in the world. At Refugee 613, we believe that everyone thrives when we create a welcoming environment. If Canada wants to be a land of asylum, it's very important to correct inequalities, to put an end to inequity and welcoming refugees. I'm sure that RIFs and LIPs also have equity in welcoming refugees at heart, and I don't claim to be able to tell them what to do. All I can say to them is to encourage them to keep doing the good work they do and to do it even more. What can LIPs and RIFs do to advance equity in refugee resettlement? I think it's critical to continue to raise your voice and to not be afraid to name the inequity and call for more equity. It's about addressing inequity upstream, and it's about responding to inequitable measures as they come. And it's not just RIFs and LIPs. Each of us has opportunities to advocate in our work for more equity in welcoming refugees. One example is the proposal at Ottawa City Council to offer free transit passes to displaced Ukrainians during the first months of the war. Thanks to the advocacy of several stakeholders, the free transit passes were offered not only to Ukrainians, but to any other refugee who didn't benefit from them under another program. Even that solution has proven to be imperfect, but we continue to advocate behind the scenes to make sure it benefits those who need it the most. The kind of advocacy in response to unfair policies is within the reach of LIPs and RIFs. They can raise their voices to demand more fairness whenever they know of an unfair measure. Downstream, I would just like to share a few questions I would ask myself if I were in the position of LIPs and RIFs today. First, what do the different waves of refugees in recent years reveal? What did the different actors, how did they respond? How were these answers perceived? Given all of this, are my advocacy priorities in the right order? Or is there a need to change the order of priorities? And last, what if we made an assessment of the different routes and facilities offered to the different waves of refugees in recent years? Despite the differences in treatment, I am convinced that Canada's response is driven by the desire to make things as easy and manageable as possible, on one hand for the refugees and on the other hand for the stakeholders. Canada has seen several waves of refugees from different parts of the world in recent years. The most recent surge is of displaced Ukrainians, but before them, we have been we have seen Haitians, Syrians, Burundians, Afghans, and more. And some of these groups have benefited from Canadian hospitality. All of them have benefited from Canadian hospitality and different measures related to arrival and settlement of some of those refugees have been taken. And we remember the priority processing and waiving fees and other requirements for Afghans, Operation Syrian refugees, the Kuwait, and waiving fees and support for flights to Canada for Ukrainians. I believe it's time to learn from all of these different measures, to draw from them new policies to follow in the event of a surge of refugees, whatever their origin, because we know there will be more surge moments. And if we don't develop consistent, flexible, and fair mechanisms for adapting to those moments, the inequities will only grow. But if we take time now to advocate for a new framework, one built on the lessons learned from different refugee welcome policies, there will be more fairness and clarity for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge, work, and your experiences. From all four of you, I certainly learned that there's definitely a need for new policies and consistency for all waves of refugees. We're going to take some questions. So the first question is for you, Araf and Rashed. Was the community response to Ukrainians and Afghan arrivals equally positive? If not, what did your LIP do about that?
Was it positive? Yes. Was it equally positive? Question mark. What did LIP do? I want to ask Araf to answer that question, but I can tell you what we should do. Sharing the narrative. Refugees are not a burden. We always categorize economic class different than refugees. But that's not the truth. Refugees come and work. They're not burden on our shoulders. We have to share that in the news. Do you see any news about Afghanistan anymore? Maybe a small one at the end of the newspaper. So that's our responsibility. As a LIP, we should have the media sit at our table and bring this. Share the good stories about the refugees who arrive in Canada. I have a staff right now. He was a psychiatrist back in Afghanistan, and he's working after 2 weeks coming to Canada. And everybody is working in mental health and addiction. Every client loves him. That's the story that we have to share. Refugees are not a burden, and that's our responsibility as a LIP.
The next, yeah, go on.
So I don't have anything to add to that specifically, but in terms of what the LIP our LIP has done in terms of making sure that we respond to that positive or not equally as positive community response has been that especially with information sharing, we have tried to make sure that the questions that the community has are responded to the best of our knowledge by sharing information through our web pages, special web pages that we had developed, as well as developing some tools that our community residents would be able to use, like guides, that they can use in order to how can they approach, for example, if they want to help with donations, or if they want to help with interpretation or employment and other opportunities, where can they go? And so we have been that bridge in terms of information sharing and closing that information gap.
Thank you. The next question I'll ask is how can the LIP support the RIFs with immigration of Francophone refugees? Apollinaire or Bella, do you want to answer this?
Je pense que déjà les LIP, il faut qu'ils soient tous conscients qu'il y a des communautés francophones là où ils sont, là où il existe des communautés francophones. Les LIP devaient en être conscients et savoir que comme ils travaillent dans la même communauté et qu'ils ont un peu les mêmes objectifs, sauf la différence de langue, alors ils devraient être partenaires. Ils devraient naturellement créer des liens. Ils devraient déjà apprendre les uns des autres comment ça se passe pour les anglophones, comment ça se passe pour les francophones. Est-ce qu'il y a des leçons à apprendre les uns des autres? Alors ce petit bout, ce petit départ pour les partenariats peut les aider à réfléchir ensemble pour voir quelle est la valeur ajoutée que les LIP peuvent apporter aux francophones. C'est ça que je pense qu'il devrait être fait. Déjà, le premier pas, c'est de créer une relation et le reste viendra ensuite.
Ce que je peux ajouter tout simplement, c'est que quand on regarde la question d'équité et qu'on parle des minorités, il faut absolument qu'il y ait des voix. Je dirais ici, le plancher des vaches, c'est nous. C'est nous qui avons affaire à des réalités sur le terrain, les réalités francophones comme les réalités anglophones. Il n'y a pas une dualité, mais c'est tout simplement qu'il faut absolument que nous puissions donner au gouvernement la mesure de la réalité sur le terrain. Si la vitalité de la communauté francophone est une réalité, le Canada est une dualité linguistique et puis culturelle. Nous sommes dans cette logique-là et puis oui, il faut absolument que les minorités aussi soient alimentées suivant une certaine proportion. 4,4%, on n'a pas réussi à les atteindre, ça fait depuis 2001, 2002 qu'on a fait cette politique. Et aujourd'hui, on n'a jamais atteint 4,4%. S'il y a des contingents qui arrivent massivement et qui s'installent, comment peut-on le faire pour que les francophones aussi aient une part? C'est très important. Et nous, les LIP, on est capable, je pense que sur le terrain, on peut exiger que le gouvernement soit logique aussi dans sa politique d'équité.
Thank you. Rashed, the next question is for you. With regards to your comments that communities should have a say in how many refugees they can support, how would they arrive to that number?
There was an announcement of IRCC about 3,000 Afghans that can come to Canada without the refugee UNHCR status. Probably you have seen it was a lot in the news. 3,000, a family of 6, if you divide, it's only 500 families. And then they had these workshops, online workshops, right? For people to come and see how they can sponsor their families. I just picked into that Zoom and see how many people are there. Like it was more than 1,000 people on each Zoom. So trying to sponsor their families or some concerned community members who wanted to support an Afghani family. So that's my point. It shouldn't be 3,000. It should be whatever the committee can sponsor. And there's another question about Ukrainian community and Afghan community. I don't think it's the Ukrainian community responsibility to support Ukrainian. It's my responsibility and your responsibility. And I don't think it's the Afghan community responsibility to sponsor Afghans. It's our responsibility. And also, remember, having United Nations status as a refugee is a privilege among refugees. There are millions of refugees who don't have that status. And that's a big question that we have to pose to the government of Canada to change it. Lots of people want to come to Canada, and they're in a very, and again, it's not just for Afghans, for all refugees. And again, what I'm saying is, let the community decide. That's my point. Let the community decide how many people they can bring who don't have the status of refugees. It's only a policy change for us. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Rashed and Araf have to leave to get to their train. So thank you so much for joining us today, and have a safe trip back home.
Thank you.
I'm going to take one more question, and then we'll move to table discussion. Does thinking of refugees in terms of Canadian social and economic objectives detract or distract from the humanitarian imperative?
Je ne pense pas, personnellement, je ne pense pas que cela nuit ou détourne de l'impératif humanitaire, parce que de toute façon, les réfugiés qui sont assistés par le gouvernement pour venir au Canada, c'est toujours le motif humanitaire. Le côté économique et social vient après. Le réfugié a le temps de s'installer, il a le temps de s'accoutumer à sa nouvelle vie, et c'est une suite normale qu'il devient actif dans le pays et puisse contribuer, mais on lui donne le temps de s'intégrer, et il va continuer sa vie comme il l'aurait fait dans son pays s'il n'avait pas été confronté à différentes crises et aux différents traumatismes. Donc pour moi, il vient à titre humanitaire, il est pris en charge pour quelque temps. Ensuite, c'est tout à fait normal qu'il puisse guérir de ses blessures et être résilient et produire et contribuer à la vie dans le pays. Donc pour moi, non, ça ne nuit pas à l'impératif humanitaire. Il y avait une question que j'étais en train de voir, mais je ne la vois plus. Une question qui disait que les LIP ne sont pas censés faire du plaidoyer. Donc je ne savais pas que les LIP ne sont pas censés faire du plaidoyer. Mais je pense qu'on peut faire le plaidoyer sans le dire, sans l'appeler plaidoyer. On peut par exemple dénoncer l'équité d'une façon diplomate et donner d'autres solutions. On peut aussi faire des études qui peuvent servir à changer des politiques et à prendre de nouvelles décisions. Par exemple, si vous faites une étude d'évaluation de la façon dont les différentes vagues de réfugiés ont été accueillies et comment ils ont été aidés à s'intégrer, ça c'est une évaluation qui va avoir des conclusions qui vont être très utiles pour les décideurs. Et vous pouvez faire la publicité de cette étude, partager les résultats et en parler, et proposer des recommandations. Ça, c'est une sorte de plaidoyer, mais vous n'avez pas besoin d'appeler cela plaidoyer. Et bon, donc, je ne sais pas si vous n'avez pas non plus l'autorisation de faire des études, mais c'est juste une suggestion. Merci.
So I want to thank our two speakers here, Bella and Aponer. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing expertise. Thank you.